Good evening. Happy Monday, everybody. I hope you all had a blessed and prayerful weekend, and I'm happy to join you again. I had to take last week off because I was at the Canon Law Society of America National Convention in Orlando, Florida, and I was busy with all of the convention things that were going on that night, and was uh, not able to come here and stream. But I'm here for this week and the next week. And before we get much further into this, congratulations are in order. You may have either on my channel or on Mark's channel seen a young man from Ireland named Adam, and he got married this last weekend. So that's quite a joyful thing, and I got to see a few photos of the wedding. Lovely, lovely church somewhere there in Ireland. So to Adam and his new bride, congratulations. I really would have liked to have gone, but it just was not possible with the number of things that had piled themselves up in November here. So that's really important news right there. Another wedding, and hopefully many blessed years to come, and a large family, including a couple of priests down the lines. Many blessings to them. That also means that I'm unsure if Mark is going to be joining us tonight. He usually manages to, but he's probably either in a nighttime time zone right now or en route back to the United States. So would be delighted if he showed up, but we might have to do this stream without his company. So that's the news that I think is really important for us to be paying attention to. But there may also be some other news that you've heard about, including continual highs in the stock market. The stock market just seems to keep on going up and up and up and up, with no sign of ever coming down there. And lots of people who think about economics or finance, all these sorts of things, are very happy about record stock market highs. And I don't pay that much attention to the stock market. I know that the diocese pension plan for priests has something to do with the stock market, and trying to invest money in a wise and ethical way in order to provide for priests in their old age. And I know that the 401k plan that I have is also got something to do with the stock market. So in theory, my retirement many, many years from now might have something to do with these stock market highs. But for the most part, and I think probably for most Americans, most people in general, what the stock market is up to doesn't have anything to do with their prosperity. It doesn't have anything to do with their day-to-day living. A record stock market high doesn't have any impact on their capacity to afford housing, to afford healthcare, and to afford groceries. And those three things, to me, seem to be really, really important things for most people. That, if their stock portfolio that they never look at is doing well, that seems nice to them. But having lots of money in the stock market when you can't afford groceries, or you have to choose between groceries and housing, you're racking up credit card debt, that doesn't really seem like prosperity to me. And so, we talk about how we use our attention on this channel a lot, and what things are worth paying attention to. And I'm of the mind that paying attention to the stock market isn't really useful for most people, and that the measure of their prosperity shouldn't be measured by something so abstract as the gross domestic product, which can be hacked by just reducing imports, or the S&P 500. These things aren't really indicative of real prosperity for most people. And so I just came up with a little something. and I can't have been the first person to come up with something like this. But this is what I think might be a good measurement of real prosperity here. We can call this the Sites Prosperity Scale if I somehow happen to be the first person to have invented it. Basically, we just take the cost of average cost of housing, home, average cost of healthcare, what people actually pay for that, not strange insurance company shenanigans, and the average monthly cost of groceries for, let's say, a family of four, and divide that by the median income. And that might actually give us a much more sensible and reasonable way of measuring prosperity, rather something than something abstract like the S&P 500 or the gross domestic product. This seems to me to be much more useful there. We're using the median income. There might be a better way to do that. Maybe the median income of the bottom 50% of the country by income. That might be a good way to do it. This isn't, anything that I'm in any position to deploy right now, because people don't usually come to me for economic advice. And that's fine, because my economic plan is to have the church take care of me until I die. So I don't have to worry about these things as much. But all of this talk of the stock market, the S&P 500, the gross domestic product quarterly, that doesn't seem to be useful to me. Can people have decent housing? Can people have basic health care? And can people afford to feed themselves? That seems to me to be a much more useful measure of prosperity than what's going on in the stock market. So that's what I think. If you're interested, you can come in here and tell me what you think. StreamYard link is posted and available. We've got a little bit of commentary here from Adam. Hello, Adam. You can sleep on an empty stomach, but you can't sleep on a headache, health, or unanswered question. Education. See, the education thing, like I'm at peace with people getting a certain baseline level of education, being able to read things, a certain amount of civics, but the most important education should happen in church. The moral formation and learning to be a good disciple of our Lord seems to be much more important than I don't know, whatever people are studying in the universities nowadays. So the education thing, especially within the United States, having free K-12 health education, that doesn't seem to be as high as a priority to me. Somebody could live a dignified life without a college degree, and lots of people do if they're able to have steady employment, a house, health care, and something to eat. So that's just what I think there. And wouldn't you calculate your own home health and groceries? Well, this is the funny thing about being a priest, is I get free housing, right? So I didn't pay for this housing that I have here. I've got health care that is managed as a part of my compensation package, and there's a grocery stipend for the house that I never have to do that. But yeah, you certainly could do those calculations yourself. But I'm thinking about news cycle things and what would be a useful thing for people on TV to talk about. Like, is the S&P 500 really helping people? Well, what about the Sites Prosperity Scale? How are we doing on that? Because if the S&P 500 is really high and the Sites Prosperity Scale is really low, that means that we've just got a bunch of monopoly money going to the moon, and people can't afford groceries, and that just doesn't seem good to me. And that's the thing is, the prime beneficiaries of the stock market going up are people who already own lots of assets. And real prosperity, to me, doesn't seem to be how well the top 1%'s assets are doing. Real prosperity would seem to me the number of people who have a certain amount of security and stability in their lives. That seems to be a much more useful thing to measure. And so looking at the bottom 50% and how they're able to afford the basics in there, that seems to be quite a bit more sensible to me than looking at the stock portfolios of the top 1%. Education can sometimes not equate to degrees. True. Degrees and job experience only show what you can be responsible about. What you understand is another topic. Okay. I mean, most of the most useful things that people learn are on-the-job training. It's a very common thing that a brand new college graduate in the field learns a lot of what they're actually going to be doing in a particular situation in being trained by somebody else in their company. So education, a certain amount of education, baseline education is good. I'm thinking in an American context where, you can get free K to 12 education sponsored by the state. Some places it's not great, frankly, but most Americans, I can't be responsible for public school systems across the country. Well, that's what I'm thinking about. If anybody has thoughts, you just go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'll be reading the comment section here. And if you missed the beginning of the stream, this looks like it may very well be a no Mark stream. And I know lots of you like his commentary and some of you don't. So if you were looking to talk about a different set of topics that we might normally talk about, maybe tonight is your chance. Degrees are mostly for other people who don't understand the field. Yeah, there's a certain amount of that. It's a way of standardizing academic achievement, which was invented by the Catholic Church and the university system in the Middle Ages. So you're welcome, I guess. Open question as to whether or not it's accomplishing the purposes now that it was set out to do. I imagine that just the way that education would have had to been done, parchment and quills back then, that might have been, frankly, more impressive. A doctorate back then was probably more impressive than a doctorate now. That standardization so that people can cooperate. That's a good point. That's what the degrees are supposed to accomplish. I sent in a midterm on Saturday for one of my canon law classes, and I always get a B from this professor because he seems to be rather resilient against grade inflation. And I kind of respect him for that. And I also am happy that he gives me B's rather than C's, because then I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to be able to complete my canon law studies because Father Beal gave me C's or something. But he's got the most interesting format for tests. He'll give you two complete sentences which appear to contradict, but are both true. And you have to tell them how both of these sentences are true. So something like, I'm in procedural law right now. Time limits cannot be extended by the judge. Time limits can be extended by the judge. That was a fair, hopefully none of my classmates from canon law school are who haven't taken this exam yet are listening to this. It is a take-home exam, but if you happen to be in Father Beal's procedures class, then pause the video and don't listen to it until Thursday. All right? Certain time limits that are set by the law, by which rights expire, those cannot be extended by the judge. But certain time limits set by the judge himself, which are a matter of convenience for the court, can be extended by the judge. So very clever exam there. That was one of the easier questions. Some of the other questions were quite a bit more complicated. So that's a fun exam style there. And, unfortunately, Father Beale is retiring this year. He's certainly taught long enough to have earned that, but it's not obvious who's going to be able to fill his rather large shoes there. So that's what I got going on in my life. And anybody who's listening, you're free to click the StreamYard link and come on. If I don't know you already, I'm gonna want to see your face on a webcam, just so if you're yeah, sounds like something out of Proverbs. And that's why I think it's such a good way of doing examinations, because it teaches you not to just memorize facts, not to just memorize canons, but you have to be able to think about them and apply them in a somewhat more useful manner. It's not something that can be it's not just a matter of memorizing, regurgitating facts. You got to apply your knowledge in a more intelligent way with that sort of exam. Which is why it's a shame that he's retiring, but time catches up with us all. So we've just got to be careful with that. Well, just a little announcement for the channel upcoming. We will be able to stream next week, that being October 27th, and that'll happen at the regular time. But on November 3rd, we won't have a stream that night, because I will be either in Assisi or in Rome, taking a trip to Italy starting next Tuesday. That's going to be about a 10-day trip, and it's going to be jam-packed. It's going to be full, and it's probably going to make it impossible for me to stream on our regular Monday night slot. I know I've been in and out a lot these past couple of months, but I think that's just how life goes sometimes. And honestly, you people are all paying for your internet connection and your internet devices already anyway. So you're getting all of this free ruminations, and you don't have to pay a dime for it. So you are actually coming out ahead, I think, even when I'm not able to make it the way that I might. If you see my camera shaking, it's because there's a train going by. That, it's not that close, but yeah. Oh, thanks, guys. I do Italy is so nice. Like, there's a reason why people enjoy going there. And I will enjoy the pilgrimage. This is, it's the Jubilee year. Maybe I've mentioned a Jubilee year here before. We get those every 25 years. And that's when they open up the holy doors in the four major basilicas in Rome. And you can get the Jubilee pilgrimage indulgence there. And so I thought I absolutely have to get this year. There can be extraordinary jubilees too, and people think there will very likely be an extraordinary jubilee in 2033, that being 2,000 years after the traditional date of our Lord's crucifixion. So that'd be 2,000 years of redemption there. It's very likely that there's going to be a jubilee year that year, but it's not guaranteed, which would mean that the next jubilee year is going to be 2050. And, I figured I want to get at this while I know I can actually go. I'm all for showing conclusions from doctrine, but I'd rather question doctrine over a coffee. A coffee for the morning and whiskey and cigars for the evening. That's the sort of... I can get behind that. I mean, depends on what we mean by doctrine here. There's plenty of doctrines of the Catholic Church that I'm in no mood to question, either publicly or privately. Yeah. Almost like a Catholic Hajj. Whatever. We call them pilgrimages, my dude. If it's not one thing, it's another, isn't it? Father Doc. I don't have a doctorate there. I hope I don't have to get a doctorate. That sounds like a lot of work. The current degree that I'm pursuing is a licentiate, which is a degree that only exists in the ecclesiastical system. So I suppose when I earn that degree, you'll have to call me your licentiousness. If you want. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I dread the possibility of being sent out for doctorate, even though I don't think it's very likely that I would, because Bishop wants me to be able to do the tribunal work in the diocese, and everything that he wants me to do, I can do with a licentiate. There's no need for me to have the doctorate there. Bubble this. Should Elon Musk, when he gets his $1 trillion reward from Tesla commission, commission a $50 billion Catholic church to be built? That would sure be something. I don't know. Like, we would just have to keep on loading that place up with gold for us to actually get to 50 billion. I feel like a $200 million cathedral would be spectacular, and I wonder how much in modern terms building St. Peter's cost. So anyway, Ron, what's up?
Your licentiousness.
I'm not there yet. I still got to complete my studies before I could be granted that title.
I hope you don't, because I have to agree with Don. It sounds like something you need to repent for from a habitual sin.
Come on, you got to let me have these little jokes here, huh?
No, I'm well with it. Like, oh, did you hear what happened to Father Eric? Yeah, he's got licentiousness in his. He's wearing it out.
Well, it's it's not as bad as the STD that a lot of priests get in Rome. Their sacred theology doctorate.
No, okay. STDs are also spiritually transmitted diseses.
Ooh, goodness!
Well, yeah.
I hadn't heard that one.
AKA demon. That one's that's what I like. That one. I'm just throwing it. So what's news? How you doing, Bubby?
Oh, it's been a busy week. I went to that convention last week. So that's, 4 days out of the office. A canon law convention in Orlando, Florida. Happened to be a very popular one because I think people took advantage of their institutions paying their airfare down there to take a trip to a park or two.
Right.
While they were down in Orlando. Our hotel and convention center was walking distance from SeaWorld. So,
oh no, that's that. Yeah, dude. I don't care who you are. Having a chance to go see Shamu, go splash a few people.
Yep. It's good times. It's good times. Oh, Ron. Someday you'll learn to plug your computer's Ethernet into the wall rather than relying on unreliable Wi-Fi signals. And that's the funny thing, is people can actually put too many Wi-Fi access points in their house, and that can actually create incredible latency there. But a nice, I've got an Ethernet cable. I can see it running to my computer as we speak. You don't have to worry about packets being dropped. Low latency. I'm a big fan. So let everyone know the wonders of the hardwiring things there. Be nice to see any forms of churches doing in country orphanages and hospitals and not overseas ones. Yeah. There's just so much red tape around that stuff nowadays. And, priests don't exactly have the best reputation in dealing with children there, and drive down medical costs with options. Um, yeah, I'm right there with you. I just, the secret sauce that made all that stuff work was having lots of sisters around. And we no longer have lots of sisters around, so I don't know how to solve that problem other than trying to encourage and promote um, there being more sisters there. We need to fight the red tape. We are drowning in it. And agreed. The sisters are better at fighting the red tape than I am. Right? Boy, you never want to mess with a nun. Like they will just absolutely get what they're looking for. It's almost as if they've got a special relationship with the king of the universe or something. I can't figure it out. So that's my solution to the problem, but it's a long-term solution. More sisters there. Send you and some sisters out for doctorates. Yep. And we need more large families to make more sisters. I'm right there with you. It's a whole cohesive package there, And I'm doing my best. But I'm just one dumb priest in North Dakota. Like I can only manage so much. But with the Lord, anything's possible. So. But it's a whole system there, We, you send a couple sisters off and a couple priests off to the seminary, and the population manages to stay under control. And hopefully, our friend, the Eastern Thomist here, is able to be a part of the solution to the problem of there not being enough sisters.
Are you talking about the nuns?
The nuns, yes, yeah. I'm dreaming for you, out loud here on YouTube, that you would have a family with many young ladies running around, and a few of them join and become holy sisters and make the world better.
Well, I mean, I just think there's got to be much better in terms of just the Catholic Church in America in general. There's just got to be better education. I mean, half the people I know who are Catholic cannot defend their faith, unfortunately.
Yeah, you think that's the solution?
Oh, yeah. I think better education in the Catholic Church, I think it goes a long way. I think there's a number of things. I think number one, I think a lot of people have kind of idolized the sort of cultural elements of Catholicism. Pope Francis talked about that. He said the reason a lot of people who are young leave the church is because confirmation is like a graduation ceremony. Like people are like, oh, I got to confirmation, I did first communion, maybe I went to Catholic school, or I went to Sunday school, or I went to church every Sunday. Now I've gotten to this confirmation point. Now I'm all good. I've got all my sacraments. Bye guys, I'm at the door. I got my Catholic conscience diploma. And I think if people kind of knew the implications of the sacraments a little bit more, I think very, very few people would leave the Catholic Church following confirmation. But I think ultimately it's just, I just think it's bad education. I think a lot of people just cannot defend, their faith. And I think it leads to, people either not caring or, going out and joining mega churches or something like that. I mean, half the people I knew from Catholic school growing up have either become, just complete atheists / agnostics, or they've like gone to mega churches, or they've gone to non-denominational churches because of that, I think.
Yeah. And I really, I think back often to Pope Benedict's writings, and I think it was in Deus Caritas Est, when he talked about how Christianity isn't a set of doctrines or an idea, but an encounter with the living God, with our Lord Jesus there. And so when we're talking about education, certainly the doctrines, the facts, those things are indispensable. But when we look at the, especially the Catholic view of education is forming the whole person,
Right.
really facilitating that encounter with our Lord there. And I've had the opportunity to walk with people through the OCIA process, and a few times you could just see people start to put things together when they got the Holy Spirit really moving in them, and at that point they become really hungry for more of this knowledge. And
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you've seen it too on a college campus or something like that, or in a parish setting where people really start to get hungry there. And then at that point, educating them is really easy because they're
Right.
just coming to you, they're grabbing you and saying, "You have the Lord. Tell me a little bit more about it, and how do I understand these different things?"
Yeah.
And so getting people to that point's actually the real key. And then like kind of after that, they're gonna, just find some good books and good people in the church and kind of educate themselves at that point.
Right.
So it's really that piece of the puzzle right there that I find to be the most interesting, because once people are hungry for it, we've got everything that we need. Yeah. So there we go. And I like looking around at the places where this seems to be working. I appreciate the model that the Fellowship of Catholic University Students has come up with.
Yeah.
Focus is because they do a very simple thing that I think is very effective, right? I've never done one of their Bible studies, but I've had it described to me. So if you've had any experience with it, you feel free to chime in. But their Bible studies are structured such that you got, the Bible story, and then in a group you work together on how you can apply what's going on there to your own life. And
Right.
I think that kind of bridging the gap between, what we could call doctrine, the doctrines contained in Holy Scripture, and like, oh, this can actually inform the way that I live. This can actually, help me to live a good and virtuous and holy life. I think when people can start making that connection, then things can really open up for them.
Yeah.
And Sally wants to ban the iPad programs, and I'm right there with you. Last thing we need is more kids in front of screens. I say to all of the people who are listening in front of a screen, but never mind that.
Well, you say that while I'm on an iPad right now.
As long as this little thing that we're doing right now doesn't take away from your real life commitments and your engagement with your local parish, then we can do it.
Yeah.
2 hours a week isn't going to hurt anybody all that badly.
Yeah, we just got a new bishop today in our diocese, or they just announced a new bishop today.
What fun!
Yeah.
Is that Albany then?
Yes.
God bless you guys. That diocese has been through some stuff.
Oh yeah. Bishop Hubbard was something else. I'll say that. Like, when he's about to die, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna get married now without any permission."
Yeah, just great. That's how you want to be remembered.
Right.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I know a lot of people who, I'm in my group chat with are kind of like, what's he going to do about the TOM? Because I've got a lot of friends that in my group chat that love the TOM, and they're like, what's he going to do about the TOM? Because technically the way it works in the Albany diocese is basically the Tridentine rite is technically completely banned in that diocese. However, it is technically allowed because there's a church in our area. There's a Carmelite church, and they have special permission to celebrate the old Carmelite rite. And so I think kind of the hope is that the diocese won't touch that, because that's, something that's like something that the Carmelites have to themselves. But that's the hope. I mean, we'll see. The hope is that they'll be, okay, this is a special Carmelite thing, principle of subsidiarity, let bygones be bygones. But, we'll see.
Yeah. Speaking of Pope Benedict, like the way he was handling things, but here we are. Looking at the comments here, been pushing your new Bible study to think about the classical virtues, and there's a great way to do that. So if you look at the four kings, Saul, David, Hezekiah, and Josiah, you can use their life as Saul, David, Solomon, and Hezekiah. You could use their lives and their Bible stories as an example of how to think about the virtues, because each of them had a major deficiency in one of the four cardinal virtues. So Saul had a major deficiency in the virtue of prudence, when he not only didn't carry out the orders of the Lord in regard to the sacking of a city, but kept on talking and digging himself deeper into a hole there, a lack of prudence there. You could see a lack of justice in King David when he's confronted by the prophet Nathan. And you could see his initial reaction when he hears the parable of the man with the sheep, is like, that man should be put to death, and he shall restore 4 times order. You could see he's got this difficulty of coming to a just resolution there. Solomon has trouble with temperance because he just couldn't stop collecting concubines, and that temperance eventually led him into idolatry. And Hezekiah was faint of heart and had a hard time carrying through with the Lord's commands there. So there was a weakness in fortitude in him. That's if you want to take that approach, you may find it sufficiently sola scriptura enough for your Baptist Bible study, Sally Joe. And Ixnan, in the common parlance, the T stands for traditional. So the traditional Latin Mass. And the reason you have to say it is that I have a Latin missal downstairs that's for the New Order of Mass from 1970 there. But you can certainly say that in Latin, but that isn't what most people mean when they talk about the Latin Mass. You put the traditional in front of there, it helps clear things up and disambiguate them. So hopefully that helps clear things up. That would be another fun way to do depictions of them. None of the images would be sola scriptura enough. Okay. David's concubines didn't draw him into idolatry, and didn't cause him quite as much trouble there. Another part where David fell short on justice was his inability to discipline his sons when they were misbehaving there.
Yeah.
So I mean, now in the new covenant, it's one man, one woman for life, no concubines. Ephesians chapter 5, all of that business there. But such things were tolerated in the divine pedagogy in those days.
Right. So, well, and should be noted, it was permitted, it was tolerated. It was not endorsed. It was permitted because of the nature of man at the time.
It's just a progressive revelation of God,
Right. It was the
and
progressive
having to
revelation of God. Right. Right.
prepare
And then
people
also,
for
because
these things.
because man was able to obtain grace ultimately by ascending to the merits of the cross by faith. A person is now going to be held accountable, and because that grace of the cross is meritorious for all of mankind. All of mankind today will be judged if they engage in those sins. But obviously, they didn't have the merits of the cross at the time, and so because of that, God ultimately allowed certain things to occur, even if He didn't endorse them. That's oftentimes, why you see things like people say, "Oh, there's slavery in the Old Testament." Well, slavery was permitted in the Old Testament. It wasn't endorsed in the Old Testament. It was permitted because of the fallen nature of man. Once you get to the New Testament and you have man able to receive grace through the merits of the cross, or able to ascend to that by faith, once that happens, then you start to see St. Paul, condemning slave trades and trying to get writing to Philemon, trying to get him to free one of the slaves. But that's one of the things that I think is an important distinction. Is there's a distinction between permissive will and active will.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't. You know, our Lord was able to. The mission of our Lord, especially in the Roman Empire in the early days, was able to have its effect in slaves. Right. So you always hear that Christianity in its earliest days was always most popular amongst slaves um, and women. And the church was able to have its sanctifying effect in them. It wasn't the fact that somebody was a slave didn't mean that they weren't able to receive grace from God and receive the sacraments and all of that.
Right.
So it wasn't the church's number one thing to deal with there. Yeah. So I yeah, I'm glad we don't have chattel slavery anymore. That's what I'll say.
Yeah,
Have any
that
of
is
you
true.
seen the new series on Amazon Prime titled House of David? If not, I highly recommend it. Very well done. I'm not going to watch it. I hardly watch any TV. So I hope it is as good as you say it is, and that it gives people a greater sense of biblical literacy and what really did happen in those days, better understanding of the Bible. And it is, frankly, really good reading too. Most people don't get stuck in the First and Second Samuel and First Kings. Find that to be a pretty gripping stuff there.
Yeah.
All right, we've got our no face crew here, but you guys are regular enough. I'll grant you the privilege of hiding your
Okay.
faces. How you doing, Kirk?
I'm doing well. I actually got a haircut. What do you think?
Oh, all right, looking
Hmm.
crisp.
And I've actually recently lost some weight.
Good. And Ron's going to make another attempt at it. He's
All right. So, can you hear me?
yep, you're coming through.
Okay. Can I hijack? Are you guys in the middle of something? I just got back
Nope.
here.
I think we're ready for our next topic.
All right.
Okay. May I
So,
propose one?
I think Ron got in there first.
mine's quick. It's just a question. I see that medically assisted suicide is kind of really taking off in Canada. Are you going to get, in the eyes of the church, should you be charged with murder if you do that? And
Yeah. So I think it's, and John Paul II laid this out in a doctrinal way in Evangelium Vitae in the 90s, that euthanasia is a form of murder. And that would be a secondary object of infallibility if you want to know how that works with the doctrinal system. But don't worry about that. Basically, like, really not going to be any flexing of the church on this one there. And I suppose, let's imagine that we have a Catholic physician who goes to church regularly, living in Toronto, and it comes out that he's engaging in this medically, he's killing people, even if he's doing it with medical and civil legal justification there. I think if I was the bishop, it would be incumbent on me to issue him a warning, tell him to stop doing that he's gravely violated the law of God, and that there may be excommunication to follow if he doesn't listen to the warning. And if he persists, then I think that would be worthy of either an interdict or excommunication as a medicinal penalty to restore justice, repair scandal, and reform the offender, which is the three ends of penal law. So,
Can you repeat that?
There would not
penal
be.
law?
I don't.
like that.
There would not be an automatic penalty associated with that. So there would need to be a warning before you could apply any of those penalties. And I would hope that there would be conscientious exemption in Canada. But things being how they are, I don't know if I'd want to count on that. So,
yeah. Oh,
Does this mean-
Canada. Yeah.
If there is
Lockdown.
no conscientious
All right.
exemption,
Well, that was it.
Would the doctor have to quit his job?
I suppose I actually, in one of my parishes, there was actually a couple from Canada. They had moved from Canada to the United States many years ago, actually. And it had something to do with the introduction of abortion in Canada. And they didn't think that they would be given enough opportunities and freedom to conscientiously object to that, because the man was a physician, and so they ended up moving to the United States of America to flee that. And I think they ended up being rather farsighted in that regard. Plus, they were just lovely, wonderful people, and I got to hang out with them because they weren't up in Canada. So,
Okay.
I got to win there.
Okay. So to get to my question, if that's okay,
Yeah.
you may have already talked about this, but if you have, I'm sorry, I didn't watch from the beginning. What has your perspective been on the recent Gaza hostage negotiation?
So I'm vaguely aware that it's going on, but I'm not particularly in tune with it. I'm not following those stories closely. So where are we at right now? I was aware that there was a ceasefire and an agreement that the hostages would be returned. Both of those seem like good things to me, but I don't have the up to the date news here.
Yeah, that's about as far as I know about that. I know that there's ceasefire, and I know the hostages were expected to return. But other than that, I don't know if anyone has claimed violation of the ceasefire or not. But yeah, that's as far as I know. But you're right that both of those things sound like good, at least to me.
Yeah, and if Mark were here, what he would say is that all wars end with treaties. And at a certain point, that's the only way to manage end of hostility, is both sides agreeing one way or another to each other's demands. So that's I'm glad we've gotten to this point. It isn't a fun thing to think about, and certainly I've been praying for peace throughout the world in a special way for the Holy Land. So yeah, I think that those poor folks have been in captivity for over 2 years now.
Yeah, I think so.
Just over 2 years now. That's a long time to be a hostage there. So my heart goes out to them, and I hope that they're able to get back to a little bit of normal life, and to heal from what was no doubt a very traumatic experience there, and hopefully this ceasefire can lead to a lasting peace. But you know, it's just a different part of the world, and the yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
So
see
how
what
have you?
happens.
So how have you been doing recently, Father? I'm sorry, I didn't watch from the beginning, so I didn't see any updates.
Oh, I've been busy. Been busy. I was at a convention for canon lawyers last week, which is why we didn't have a stream last week. And next week on Tuesday, I'm leaving for a pilgrimage trip to Italy. So that'll be nice, but it'll also be another, on Tuesday of next week. So I won't be streaming from Italy because I'd have to do that at like 2 o'clock in the morning to keep the regular time slot, and I'm just not going to do that. Yeah. So this is a busy time of year for me, and I'm working on my JCL thesis right now too, and that's it's a bit of a daunting project, but I think if I just keep on writing, eventually it'll be done. So,
What's a JCL?
Juris Canonicis Licentiae, so a canon law degree.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And but you'll still be streaming next Monday.
Yeah. Next Monday I should be on. It'll just be the first Monday of November. I'll be overseas, and not much in the mood at 2 o'clock in the morning to hop on with you guys. Nothing personal.
Are you going to the FSSP pilgrimage? Is that the one you're going to?
No. This is one sponsored by our diocese.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's me and the bishop and 48 of our closest friends that I've never met. So it should be fun. You meet all sorts of people on these pilgrimages. My parents had mentioned that a friend of theirs from their parish, this is going to be their first time traveling overseas. This person is older than they are, and just like, hey, look out for her, and so yeah, that'll be fun. And especially when we get to do these pilgrimages, really with a faith-based thing, we're not going to be going into this with a skeptical mindset or that. I'm really hoping that our tour guides are good, because I don't want to have to start arguing with them about the authenticity of this, that, or the other thing. Be nice if they were also faithful, but we'll see about that. Good night, Ron.
Have you read any of Father Cornelio Fabro?
Fabro, I am not familiar with him.
Yeah, I'm starting to get into him a little bit. He's a 20th century Dominican, but he writes only about the principle of participation. Like a lot of the neo-Thomists, like Father Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange and others, they'll have this style where they'll try to kind of restate everything St. Thomas Aquinas says in kind of a more modern lens. Like Father Garrigou-Lagrange, oftentimes what he'll do is he'll take what St. Thomas thought of, Mariology, specifically pertaining to the Immaculate Conception, and he'll try to harmonize that with the church's view today, and he'll try to harmonize that with other thinkers like Blessed John Duns Scotus. Father Cornelio Fabro basically only writes about the principle of participation. That's the only thing he writes about, period. He doesn't write about any other Thomistic doctrine. He just writes and he makes a point of that. He makes a point of only writing about the principle of participation.
So I'll tell you what I remember. I remember being in one of my Summa survey elective classes in seminary where we couldn't even cover the whole thing in a semester, but just doing a survey of one part of the Summa. And Dr. Hip, who, I don't believe in reincarnation, but if I did, I would believe that Dr. Hip was Thomas Aquinas reincarnated. He said that the most exciting development in Thomistic studies recently was this exploration of the doctrine of participation.
Yeah.
And if I had to guess, he probably had this guy in mind.
Father Fabro, yeah.
But probably declined to name drop him. Is he a Dominican?
He was a Dominican. He was a 20th century Dominican in Italy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important, and it's I don't know. You certainly you're welcome on here, but people make it to this YouTube channel via different pathways. Did you happen to come by the the Jordan Peterson to Paul Vanderklay pathway, or did you just happen to see a priest on YouTube and think, I'm going to go talk to him?
Oh, well, I mean, are you talking about just coming on the stream? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh no, I just saw it. Just got recommended to me one day that there was a stream, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this. And then I was like, oh, this is every Monday. Okay, I'll just subscribe. And then
interesting.
I didn't go down the Jordan Peterson rabbit hole. I have a lot of friends that did. I never really got Jordan Peterson. I mean, he's kind of a guy that sort of beats around the bush.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially there was that Jubilee debate where he had a debate with this atheist kid, and this atheist kid is like, well, do you know what the Catholic Church teaches about Mary? You believe that, right? And he's like, well, who says I do? And then he's like, aren't you on this debate? Isn't this debate called debating a Christian? Well, who says I'm a Christian?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you have to decide. He's like, don't be smart with me. I haven't decided what I am. And it's like, the man walks around wearing like a shirt with Byzantine icons of saints.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't scream, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Or at the very least, that's something. If that's like this weird, cool aesthetic that you're trying to do, shouldn't that at the very least make people think that you're a Christian? I mean,
what I find interesting, Eastern Thomist, is and what's your name, by the way?
My first name is Nolan.
Yeah, what I find interesting about that is Peterson criticizes postmodernism, and he criticizes people like Jacques Derrida a lot. But when I look at Derrida's philosophy about how you can just take a word and deconstruct it because there's an infinite amount of interpretation, that sounds pretty much exactly how Peterson does when he says, well, what do you mean by do? And what do you mean by you? And then when you ask that you define that, you just say, you go to another word. That's exactly the type of postmodern charlatanry that he criticizes.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think the big difference is that the postmoderns were usually really evil, and I don't think that Dr. Peterson's quite so. Even if I do find him a little bit frustrating in his continual clinging to materialist principles while pointing at spiritual realities, which is, I think, where people find him the most frustrating, is that he's still very consistently rather materialistic in his thinking, but he's at the edge of materialism. And he's like, oh boy, I wonder what's out there. But just to give a little bit of background, it's an interesting thing here is that there's this whole constellation of YouTube channels and people yapping on the internet. And, that's how I came in here. And there's a particular thinker named Dr. John Vervaeke, who's got some interesting work, and he's also got some problems, as do many of us. And his idea of trying to break up the idea of knowing into different types of knowing, right? So he's got propositional knowing, procedural knowing, perspectival knowing, and participatory knowing. and he has in the past talked about trying to recover contact epistemology. Sort of like how football's a contact sport. We want to have a contact epistemology where our minds are actually, having a connection and a communication with, we could say, the forms of the things that we're going there. And he's trying to reconstruct this from a cognitive science perspective, rather than making, building it upon Aristotle or something like that. So we'll see how much his project bears fruit. All of that to say that it's just really interesting that there's so many different people in so many different parts of the world that are trying to recover this sense of participation.
Oh yeah.
In different ways, like this convergence of all these different things. And I've kind of noticed that like everybody's coming up with, we don't have a unified vocabulary for how to talk about what Dr. Vervaeke would call participatory knowing, what Thomas Aquinas, as far as I can tell, would talk about developing different intellectual habits. You could find somebody like Gerard Manley Hopkins talking about it in terms of inscaping. You can hear Cardinal Newman talking about it in, oh gosh, he's got his different types of knowing in the grammar of assent. It's like noetic knowing. So we don't have a unified vocabulary on it. And that's kind of frustrating, but it is fun to watch all these different strands come together to try and cure the West of its addiction to materialism. So,
well, if my memory serves me correctly, wasn't I forgot, is it Carol what was, I forgot, I don't know how to say
Wojtyła.
Wojtyła, I believe, wasn't he a phenomenologist?
Whatever happened to that guy, by the way?
He became Pope John Paul II. But yes,
Yeah.
he did study Hegel and Husserl and Weber and all of those. And he was, like you can also see like him kind of pointing in that kind of direction too, but from that 20th century continental phenomenological perspective. Like you can't actually understand his theology of the body properly without having dug into Husserl and Weber and that kind of milieu there where he was coming from.
Yeah.
You can still get good things from it, but like to really understand where he was getting all of his vocabulary from, you've got to know a lot about dead Germans. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think Mark would. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure Mark dislikes continental. A lot of these continental guys.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just prefer kind of straightforward Thomism. It seems to be just a lot more direct, and we spend less time, in relations relating to themselves, and it just. But hey, what do I know, right? I'm just a dumb canon lawyer.
Whatever path leads people to God. And so Eastern Thomist, if I may, what so what do you do professionally?
Well, I've got a job on the side right now. I'm just right now I'm just kind of I just kind of have a job. I'm just trying to make money. My plan is at some point I'm probably going to go back to college, and I'll probably get that my plan is probably to get a degree in theology eventually. Right now I'm just trying to save up money. Right now I'm just kind of working a day job right now.
Okay, and sorry, what's the side job you said?
Well, it's a day job. I work I work a day job right now. It's not a theologically related day job. It's just a job. It's just a job that I do right now to make money. But
not a
my
career.
plan
It
is,
sounds like, huh? Not a career.
No, not a career right now. I'm saving up money. I'm planning to go back to school at some point. I mean, I have a bachelor's right now. I'm planning to probably get a master's in theology, and then pursue maybe a teaching job or something of that nature after that.
See, he's just very pious, and he wants to live a life of poverty. If he wanted to make the big bucks, he would go into canon law, obviously.
I've discerned canon law. The problem is I just love philosophy a lot more than I do canon law. I'd be open to canon law. It's just when it comes to interests, philosophy just interests me a lot more. Philosophy is just like, oh, this just is like ding, 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 ding. But I'd be open to canon law potentially. It's just it's a pretty extraneous process from what I know, and you got to be really honed in on that.
Yeah. No, you gotta know what you want there. I'm only doing canon law because my bishop told me to. Not that I'm like feel like I'm being forced into something, but if I was given the option, it's like, you could do it or could not do it. I'm like, well, maybe we could just not.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned then seminarian Karol Wojtyla. He was one of the people that was taught by Father Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange,
Right.
who was the famous French 20th century Thomist, but he got his education from him.
Yeah, he got his education from a lot of people, but I think it was like in his biography, he talks about, he still had his project of engaging with phenomenology in order to figure out a Catholic way of doing that, which I think was successful. But the phenomenology project doesn't seem to have gotten much outside of the universities there. But yeah, he did talk about like his period with Father Garrigou-Lagrange, and really appreciating that being grounded in the tradition there, the more traditional way of doing things. I really liked. I read the first volume of the the 3 Ages of the Interior Life.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of that right now. Yeah,
I really enjoyed that. That was I thought that was worth reading. I never read volume 2 because I felt like those were probably mysteries that were beyond me. But the first volume was very practical.
yeah.
And out of curiosity, Father, when you say the postmodernists are, in your view, pretty evil, who are you including in that?
I
Because
mean,
there's different.
I especially think of Foucault, right? Like he was verifiably pretty evil. And the whole project of deconstruction, it's not like destroying something is always bad. Sometimes things need to be bulldozed, but there is also a way of just deconstructing and destroying things for the sake of doing that, and the spirit that motivates just continual skepticism, continual deconstruction. That I really don't trust.
I agree. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Derrida, but Foucault and like Deleuze, I don't necessarily know if they're as bad as Derrida. Because I think the problem with Derrida is he's trying to destroy, whereas it seems that Foucault and Deleuze and more of the other French ones were trying to. It seems as though they had more of a criticism of biopolitics, whereas for Derrida it was more about like trying to deconstruct language.
But
And
Foucault would also rape boys in graveyards in the middle of the night. So
yeah, that's true. So as a
I,
personal life, yeah.
I, I don't think you can have that big of a distinction between your personal life and your thought process.
Yeah.
like it may be one thing if you had, given into your passions while on a business trip and you felt really sorry and you repented of it and you never did it again. Like there's a certain unpleasantness about that, but the whole of your life might be whole after that. But there's also, doing things that are really um, not just evil in weakness, but like there's some real malice behind that. And at that point, I'm really just, I wouldn't trust you with a lemonade stand.
Definitely.
So
Well, the thing I find interesting, not as much about Foucault, but about Deleuze, is that I heard that he was influenced by theology, not Catholic theology, but specifically pantheism and Spinoza. But to my understanding, that would be contrary to Catholic theology.
yeah, no, there's a distinction between creature and creator right there in Genesis chapter 1. So
Yeah.
there you have it. It is
Right. Active being. That's one of the things that Father Fabro talks about. Is he talks about the act of being, and he basically describes the act of being wherein a person, kind of participates, in, what they were ultimately designed for. And that's kind of where he sort of criticizes Blessed John Duns Scotus a little bit, because he kind of says, taking from St. Thomas, he says, the idea of a principal cause is that a principal cause has to be something that is above everything else that is being participated within it. And if God is just unequivocal, then that just means that he is more than every cause, but he's not above every cause. He's just surpassing every cause, which is why he says that the analogy of being, and he kind of connects that with the act of being, and he says that those are two big, important, hand-in-hand ideas of participation.
I mean, Bishop Barron talks about this a lot of times, right? When he just makes the point over and over again that God is not in competition with his creation.
Right.
And God is not like one being among others, but has a preeminent and an irreplaceable place in there. And he is. We're going to do the Catholic thing, right? You ready for the Catholic thing? We're just going to start saying things in Latin. Ipsum esse subsistens, right? So there's the Catholic thing. Write that down on your bingo card. Just throwing random Latin words into the public discourse. But this essay is a really interesting word. It's the infinitive form of to be in Latin. And the idea is that God is the only possible thing. I've got to use really inadequate language here, whose very nature is existence, and everything else in creation is radically contingent upon the existence of God for our own existence. And to get to the point about participation, that we participate in the being of God, and he shares that with us, not in the same way that he has it, because he has it in an infinite and transcendent way, but we still have our own share in the being of God there. And I think Spinoza manages to get things wrong by not having a clear distinction between the infinite being of God. When we say infinite, it means it has no boundaries on it. It's fully capable of everything. There's no limitation to it.
Right.
And the finitude of creatures there. I can't perform an angelic act because I don't have an angelic nature. I can't do that, but I can perform a great number of human acts because of my human nature, which has that certain limitation about it there. So like the sort of infinite being of God gets condensed down into an individual part of creation, and then is able to act in that. So that's what Spinoza got wrong. And I hope God has mercy on him. Maybe he's still in purgatory. I don't know.
Yeah.
That just really doesn't work in English, man. And that's why you always hear Bishop Barron and guys like me just slip into Latin, because the Latin is just so crisp. Did you study Latin in undergrad, Nolan?
No, I did not. Well, my bachelor. Yeah, no, I did not.
You're gonna have to get caught up on that. Get the. I'll tell you what you should get. While you're working the Dairy Queen or whatever, you should also take a little bit of time with Collins' Primer for Ecclesiastical Latin.
Yeah.
That'll be some of the best time you spend, so that you can die. It says, like the standard English translation of the Summa that we got, it's okay. Yep. It's not like, so flawed that I don't tell people not to use it, but you're not really doing Thomism until you can dive into the Latin and really get your teeth into it.
I get that.
Yeah, I would, even though I'm not a Catholic, I would like to eventually maybe learn some Latin, because it does seem like a beautiful language. But I heard it's pretty difficult for an English speaker.
I found it less difficult than Biblical Greek. And once you get your mind acclimated to it, it's pretty. But I also saved my Latin homework for Sunday afternoons, because I just thought it was so much fun that it didn't really feel like I was working. So that's who you're talking to here.
I mean, time flies by when you're having fun.
Time does fly by when you're having fun, and sitting down and learning about ablative absolutes and the various uses of the subjunctive and future perfect and the pluperfect. It's all good.
So what have you been thinking about recently, Nolan?
What have I been thinking about lately?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been studying the doctrine of predestination a decent amount lately. I've been studying that a decent amount, so I've been thinking about that a little bit. But I mean, if that's what you're asking, I don't know if you're asking about world events or if you're just asking about doctrines.
In general.
Oh, in general? Yeah, I mean, that's, I think about theology a lot, outside of that, I'm just kind of trying to get by.
Okay. Yeah, what exactly is the doctrine of predestination again?
Well, the doctrine of predestination is essentially the idea that in God, or God providentially, or man's end, the ultimate necessity for man's end ultimately lies in God and through God's grace, and it kind of connects to the act of being, wherein man receives his being from God, and man receives essentially the faculties to complete his natural end from God. That's essentially the Thomistic understanding of predestination. Now, a Calvinist would disagree with that. I think a Calvinist and a Molinist would have different views on what predestination is, but that's in a nutshell what the Thomistic definition of it would be.
What's a Molinist?
A Molinist is essentially essentially a Thomist would say, when it comes to God's predestination and God's foreknowledge, there is a certain level of necessary knowledge that God has in regards to his providence, whereas a Molinist would say that God God ultimately predestines. He respects people's free wills by looking into multiple different possible worlds and ultimately predestining a person based on what he thinks is the best outcome based on those multiple different scenarios that goes on. So a Molinist would say, okay, this morning you brushed your teeth, but that's because God saw a different scenario where this morning you didn't brush your teeth, and he thought that this would be a better scenario for his providence and his creation if you brushed your teeth this morning, which is ultimately why he predestined that the events would unfold in such a way where you would brush your teeth this morning. Whereas St. Thomas Aquinas would say, God has necessary knowledge, and things kind of play around, or creation in general plays around that necessary knowledge, as opposed to what Father Luis de Molina would say, which is basically God's knowledge is centered around ultimately what all these different scenarios and all these different possibilities.
Yeah, so Molina was a 17th century Jesuit priest who was wading into the debates about predestination that were common at the time of the Reformation there. And so what I think, that consideration of the possible worlds there, that's commonly called middle knowledge, isn't it?
Right, correct.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas, and I hang with my boy Thomas, and I think where Molina might be getting wrong is imagining that God's freedom is in competition with human freedom, and
Right.
that was sort of like the era, right? And
Right.
which is a result of the kind of the centuries of tendency towards materialistic thinking up to the Protestant Reformation. You can see the tendencies towards materialistic thinking already in a somewhat more inchoate state, even in the centuries before the Protestant Reformation and the beginning of so-called modernity. Um, uh, so yeah, and when you've got material things that can't be spiritually hierarchically ordered, they can only occupy space on the flat plane that they're at, and so God would necessarily be in competition with his creatures because he exists on the same plane. But when you're able to see spiritual hierarchy and the connection between those different things, which is why the doctrine of participation is important, because that's how we connect to God and how he can be above us and like absolutely necessary, but still allow freedoms because of the different spiritual levels there. So it's like things aren't contingent from God's perspective, but they seem very contingent to from our perspective. And that's because we exist on different levels of reality there. So it feels like, like let's imagine that I am in fact predestined to heaven. It still feels like I could give in to my passions and begin to live a worldly life. Like that's a possibility that's open to me. But God has like perfect knowledge that I'm not going to do that. I'll continue to strive after virtue and obtain a blessed reward for that, assuming, of course, that that's what's going to happen in the future. Because from my perspective, I still feel like I could still zoom off the path. I'm not
Right.
planning anything.
So is it like a form of compatibilism?
I guess that would be the modern framing of it, but that's a modern word with modern baggage that I don't fully understand. So I'm suspicious of new words.
And I actually have a kind of technical question on that, Father, if that's okay. So how is this reconciled with what seems to be indeterminacy and certain interpretations of quantum physics, because basically, to my understanding, Father, there's interpretations of quantum physics which say things could have gone otherwise. And would this violate the idea of God's pre-knowledge, or?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think when you understand act and potency, I don't think that at all destroys, that idea in quantum physics that something could have gone that way. Like, for example, if a person wakes up tomorrow morning and, heaven forbid, gets hit by a bus and dies, obviously, physics, the physics of the bus hitting him says that there's a way he could have avoided that. He could have not been hit by a bus. But you could say providentially, actions just kind of played out in this A, B, or C manner that led to that happening, ultimately from a providential standpoint.
And I have my interpretation of quantum mechanics, which I don't have a physics degree, but I have seen interesting videos on YouTube about it. And this is kind of an Aristotelian take on quantum mechanics. So Aristotle has this idea of prime matter. So let's imagine that, Kirk, you go out to the woods and you cut down a tree and you cut it up into firewood. You dry it out, and then you burn the firewood, and you're left with a piece of charcoal there. So you actually have three different things, right? Three different substances. You start off with a tree, and then you go to a log, and then you end up with charcoal, right? But we would say that there's matter that is identical underneath those different changes there. And so the matter that's being acted upon is, we can call that prime matter when it's at its least informed there. You can never actually encounter prime matter in the wild. It always has some sort of form giving it identity and function. But prime matter is just sort of a tool that we keep in our intellectual toolbox to imagine that sort of thing. So my interpretation of quantum mechanics, you call this a Site's interpretation of quantum mechanics, but you may as well just call it the Aristotle interpretation of quantum mechanics, because that's who I'm stealing it from, is that by the time we're measuring matter at such an infinitesimal scale, it has like a very unstable relationship with the forms that it's interacting with. And it's in a position where it could move from one form to another very easily or very rapidly, because, and this is something that I've heard about quarks. I don't really fully understand quarks, but every time that we've tried to break them up into smaller pieces, they seem to rearrange themselves instantly. They don't want to be there. So that seems like we're getting at the very bottom of what could be measurable matter, and everything else is like prime matter underneath that. So that you would, of course, expect there to be more indeterminacy where there's more potency and less act. Because when there's act, which is bringing potential into realization, then you should expect that there's going to be less indeterminacy there. So all of that to say that God knows what he's doing when he made all of this stuff, and none of it is beyond his grasp, even if from our perspective it seems rather fluid and indeterminate. I hope that made some kind of sense to somebody out there. It made sense to me when I was speaking.
It kind of makes sense. I'd have to think more about it, because it seems as though there are different interpretations. But yeah, I'd have to think about it. But certainly, it actually kind of sounds like some interpretations of quantum mechanics I've heard. I've heard certain interpretations of quantum mechanics that are deterministic, and what you described sounds like a deterministic process.
It will eventually be determined, but while it's in change, you might not necessarily be able to see which way it's going.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like, yeah, that sounds like some interpretations of quantum mechanics I've heard. So
Well, these physicists hobble themselves by not studying Aristotle, so
Yeah.
they could have gotten there a lot more quickly. But that's just what I think.
so Nolan,
Yes.
so how did you get interested in theology out of curiosity?
I got more into my faith in college, and I started to look into more Christian and Catholic related stuff. And then I just stumbled upon St. Thomas Aquinas, and I was like, oh, this just makes so much sense. And then it just kind of became a pastime.
I see. And are you interested in any other of the church fathers?
Yes, I have studied a lot of the church fathers. I've studied a decent amount of Saint Jerome, decent amount of Saint John Chrysostom. I've studied a little bit of Saint Augustine. I've got to read a little bit more of Saint Augustine. Yeah, the church fathers are they're very compelling. They're very compelling in shutting down a lot of heresies.
Yeah. So have you read any of the Confessions of St. Augustine?
I've read a couple of them. I need to read more.
Yeah, if you're going to read St. Augustine's Confessions, you want to make sure you get the right translation, because there's one translation in particular, and it's dangerous because it's a public domain translation that's really awful.
Oh no, is it in the Pidgin language, like the Pidgin Bible?
No. It's just so I made the mistake of buying this when I was in seminary. Let me see if I can find the name of this guy.
Is he like a Calvinist who wants to argue that St. Augustine was secretly a proto-Protestant, even though he believed in papal supremacy, active and permissive will, and all these other doctrines that were opposed to Calvinism?
Yeah. No. It was just really, really bad. Like it was just boring to read. There's a lot of good translations. There's just this one really bad translation that I can't recommend you to stay away from enough. Pine Coffin. R.S. Pine Coffin. That's the worst one. It was 61. I thought it was older than that. Anyway, stay away from the Pine Coffin translation. You'll be dead.
Okay.
And so, Nolan, would you say Aquinas is your favorite church father, or just one you really like?
Well, I don't consider St. Thomas Aquinas a church father by any means.
Right.
I mean,
So just
13th century is late to be a church father. I mean, St. John Damascene being a church father is stretching it a little bit. But
Yeah.
St. Thomas Aquinas is that's like a Mr. Fantastic stretch to say that the medievals are church fathers.
Yeah, Kirk, just to let you know, in Catholic theology, the term church father does have a rather defined meaning. So,
So what does it mean?
It's got a certain antiquity about it. So, you discern if somebody's a first church father first by antiquity and orthodoxy, and I think it's also probity of life. If you meet those three criteria, then you could be considered a church father. And by common estimation, St. John Damascene in the 8th century was considered the last of the church fathers, and kind of the close of the theology of antiquity there. So we would say that St. Thomas Aquinas is a doctor of the church. That's a declaration saying that his doctrine has a universal value. for the whole church. But he isn't considered a father. So that's just a technical point. Something that I wouldn't expect you to necessarily know because you didn't study it. So
I see. So who would you say is your favorite church father, Nolan?
Who is my favorite church father? Well, I am a big fan of St. John Chrysostom. He's one that I'm definitely a big fan of. I know a lot of people like St. Irenaeus too, but I think St. Irenaeus is not as systematic. I mean, he's kind of someone who you can say, "Ooh, he's talking about this thing that's debated in the church today," but I mean, he's not really as systematic. I would say St. John Chrysostom. I really like how systematic he is in a lot of his approaches.
Yeah, I don't know much about St. John Chrysostom. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that he was influenced by Stoicism, and I believe he was. I believe he was influenced by Stoicism. I've heard that he was. That's the only thing I've heard about him. And then I also heard that unfortunately he was influential on the Nazis later on, but I also don't know much about that
yeah.
connection.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was influenced by Stoicism back then. It was basically the best that the ancient world had to offer. And so even for those who didn't study it in depth or consider themselves Stoics, it was commonly utilized there. He did have some sound bites about Jewish people that were pretty sharp, pretty harsh. Maybe not something I'd ever say from the pulpit. But there was a certain context he was talking about in there, and that was in the era that St. John Chrysostom was in. Christianity was ascendant not only in what we call the religious sphere and like people joining up and accepting the doctrines, but it was also politically expedient to become a Christian, and you'd be more likely to get an important post in government or be more socially secure if you became a Christian. And so the church had to deal with a new problem, that being people who, like when you're in persecution mode, or at least like a suspicious minority mode, you're not going to get a whole lot of people joining for the wrong reasons, right? They're going to be joining because they heard the doctrine of Christ and want to be a part of that. There's not much room for other motives in there. So there was this suspicion that there were people who had undergone baptism but hadn't really had the change of heart. And when you get those sound bites from him, he's talking about people that he at least suspects didn't really give up Judaism and don't really believe in Christ, but had just received baptism for the political expediency there. So that's kind of the context of some of those statements that you can read. Whether or not you think that is good enough is up to you. It's not up to me. But that was the way I was explained to me. But you're the Eastern Thomist here. You should have a greater love for Chrysostom than I do, because my boy's Augustine, among the church fathers.
Well, look, St. Augustine and St. Paul, I mean, they were closer. I wouldn't say they were proto-Thomists, but they were closer to being proto-Thomists than they were to being proto-Calvinists. I mean, there's this, this myth that Saints Paul and Augustine were both, they were the first Protestants, or they were the first Calvinists. And if you read St. Augustine's views on predestination, that is absolutely not true. I mean, I was getting into a conversation with somebody the other day who was a Molinist, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Saint Augustine was absolutely a monergist," And I was like, really? Because he believed in active and permissive will and participation. And then he was like, okay, yeah, maybe St. Augustine wasn't actually a Calvinist.
Yeah. You've got to read something other than his anti-Pelagian writings in order to get a full picture of.
Well, you've just got to read it in context. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the things that a lot of quote unquote reformed apologists will do is they'll cherry pick certain verses without giving you the ultimate context of what they're saying, both in the Bible and in a lot of church father quotes as well. Like a lot of times you'll see like they'll oftentimes use the quotes from Saint Jerome, where Saint Jerome says something that sounds like he's affirming sola scriptura, where he says, "Oh, all the knowledge that we need to be saved is possessed in the scriptures," which first of all, he's talking about material sufficiency. Material sufficiency is not incompatible with Catholic teaching. Material sufficiency is literally endorsed in the modern catechism. But number two, material sufficiency does not contradict the idea of papal supremacy or papal infallibility or ecclesial infallibility. And if for as many quotes where St. Jerome says that, he also says things like, "Oh, the church is like Noah's Ark. People need to be on it to be saved from the waves of sin or the waters of sin or the waters of fiery punishment. People need to be associated with that." So as much as he'll say something that sounds like, well, something that sounds like, "Oh, scripture contains everything we need to be saved." He also says things like that. He also says things like, "Oh, the church is like Noah's Ark and everyone needs to be on it," which is contrary to the Protestant view of formal sufficiency. Formal sufficiency is the idea that that fideism or faith is just an internal disposition. It's not an assent to a previously proposed claim, and therefore it's not necessary that you need a speaker to present a truth to you that exists. That idea, which is basically what sola scriptura is in modern terms. Nowhere does St. Jerome teach that. He teaches the opposite of that on multiple occasions. And so I think people do that with St. Augustine. Like they see, oh, he said the word predestined, or he said the word elect, or he said the word reprobate. That means he's a Calvinist. When in all reality, Calvin just took these words that had meaning and just created new terms and new definitions for them.
I mean, you could imagine, like let's say there was somebody who's very foreign to the Judeo-Christian context that didn't really know anything about it, but found the scriptures beautiful, and was reading them, but found them very perplexing. They might get to something like Isaiah chapter 51 and wonder who that's talking about. Is it talking about the author himself or somebody else? And you would need somebody, maybe a deacon, to show up there and explain to him how to typologically apply that to Christ.
Right.
So not like that would ever actually happen, but certainly the principles we could learn from a story like that let us know that faith comes through hearing.
Right.
That's good. Somebody should write that down.
Right. Well, that's one of the things St. Thomas talks about in the treatise on faith. Is faith is not this idea of just I believe. Oh, I believe Michael Jackson is secretly alive and he's in a secret CIA bunker. Okay, well, what caused you to believe that? Oh, nothing. I just believe that. Well, that's not true belief. Belief would be like, oh, Father Seats or Sites. I don't. Sorry if I'm
Second time.
Yes, Father Seitz, he is going to have a pilgrimage outside tomorrow, but the weatherman, his local weatherman, says that it's going to pour down and it's going to rain. So he says, okay, I'm going to adjust my plans based on that. Either I'm going to postpone or cancel my pilgrimage, or I'm going to tell parishioners or laymen to bring umbrellas and rain jackets so that they can do the pilgrimage in the rain and maybe look like Luce. That would ultimately be him assenting to the claim that this weatherman is saying that is first proposed to him. And you're absolutely right. In Romans chapter 10, when St. Paul says, faith comes from hearing, that's absolutely, an assent to a claim that's being presented first and foremost. And the problem is, and this is what St. Thomas says, is because that is the case, the first proposal of faith needs to be a certain one. It can't just be, well, I guess this means that, I guess this means this, I guess this means that. So the first proposal of faith, or the first symbol of faith, can't be, oh, I've read Isaiah 53 and I think that's Jesus, or maybe I also think that that's Israel, because some rabbinic Jews today will say it's Israel and not Jesus. That's not the first symbol of faith, because that's ultimately prone to error. Therefore, you have to have a first proposal of faith, which ultimately lays something down, which ultimately proceeds from a source that is completely certain. And that's where, the Bishop of Rome would come in. And that's also, the certainty element is also where, papal infallibility would come in.
And
When the
and the
Bishop of
tradition,
Rome,
and the tradition is
well, and the
also.
tradition too. I mean,
It's
well, the
like,
tradition,
this is the way we do things. This is the way we
right?
teach. This is what's always been taught. Just so I'm a big fan of tradition. I'm sure you are too. So as much as I love, Il Papa, and will gladly assent to any infallible or non-infallible doctrine that he proposes. I just like to give a word in there for tradition as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tradition, the fact that many Protestants poo-poo tradition is one of the weirdest positions they take. I mean, it seems, kind of seems like a no-brainer. You read something in the context of how it was written. That's really all tradition is. It's reading things in the light of when it was written. I'm not going to read William Shakespeare through a 2025 lens. And likewise, I'm not going to, if I'm reading certain passages in the Bible, like if I'm reading the passages in the Bible that people will say debunk the immaculate, or the perpetual virginity, or debunk clerical celibacy, I'm not going to read those those verses in the context of 2025 America, where Pastor Mikey from Billy Bob's megachurch has 10 kids with his second wife. And, we live in this post-sex revolution society where everybody has kids and whatnot. I'm not going to read it through that lens. I'm going to read it through a lens wherein, celibacy in the early church was considered this gift, and was considered, almost this charism that a person had, where it wasn't like, oh, this is being asked of you, but rather, wow, God has given you this gift to where you don't need sex as your natural end, or you feel you don't need that. It's this gift that God gave you. And so I'm going to read the Bible through the mentality that those writers had. I'm not going to read it through the perspective of 2025 America, but I think Protestants often do that. They'll be like, well, no, tradition's bad because Jesus told the Pharisees tradition's bad, even though Jesus was not talking about divinely inspired traditions in that verse. They'll be like, well, Jesus said tradition's bad. That means just interpret the Bible the way you would interpret your current church or your current church situation, which in my opinion, that just seems like one of the most obviously false doctrines. It's very hard to believe that a lot of people, fall for that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just the times we find ourselves in. But the tradition, as the word itself means, is something that you need to have handed down to you, and that you need to be able to receive there. Which is why both Catholic and Orthodox value value highly their apostolic succession and the apostolicity of their church communions there. And I'll tell you something that I'm starting to value very highly is a good night's sleep. And I'm 2 yawns into this stream now, so I think we're coming time to wrap her on up here.
Yeah.
Good
So
night, Jonathan.
Kirk and Nolan, it was good to have you both on. I
You as
hope
well.
everybody found something engaging and edifying here. See you all next week. Good night and God bless you all.
Good night and God bless.